Welcome everyone to another cafe. Before we get started, some practical stuff. There is a chat window. It has disappeared on my screen again, but I'm sure it's there. So we'll find it if you type something in there. But this is a regular Zoom meeting, so you can also, and you're actually welcome to, you can unmute yourself at any time and you can talk. So don't hesitate to do that as well. If you have questions, just ask them. I've seen a preview of this presentation. It is rather technical, so I would advise you not to wait until the end, but ask questions when they come up. This session is being recorded. I was just checking. Is being recorded. It will be posted on YouTube, just as all the others, once it is complete. One more thing, next week is another cafe. They are every week, so that's easy enough to say. And if I am not entirely mistaken, that is a session that I will do about switch scripting, but this time the magnificent new scripting environment. So much more fun than what we did last week in the old scripting environment. So that said, we have a guest today who is going to do all the talking, so I can keep quiet and just look at your questions and see if I can interrupt him. Guest is Vincent from Callas. So right from the source, if it doesn't work, I think you can blame him as well afterwards. So at least you know who's responsible if it goes wrong. Like I said, feel free to ask questions either in chat or during the event. But from this point on, I'm going to give the microphone to Vincent. And Vincent, it's all yours.
Okay, yeah, hello. Yes, David introduced me. I'm Vincent from Callas, and I'll be showing you today how you can set up an environment to uh, um, create your own custom Ask at Runtime dialog and also debug it, for instance. And yeah, just let's start. We have here just a PDF file. And a profile that I've created to show you the custom Ask at Runtime dialog. Um, for the people who don't know, if you create a profile, you have this under variables, this
This
dialog.
dialog.
I can hear myself twice now. Okay, now it's gone. Under variables, this dialog select box, and here you can create a new Ask at Runtime dialog. So yeah, this profile only contains one fix-up, which I named add date, because our custom Ask at Runtime dialog is going to have a custom input field, which is going to be a date picker. Yeah, this add date fix-up only contains place text, which places the contents of this variable in the upper left corner of our PDF file. Yeah, I mean, we can test this right now. And as it stands now, we have this, this input field where we can just simply place anything we want. And we probably wouldn't want that because, we want a date in there, and people could mess things up. So that's could be problematic. Yeah. Now press cancel. That was stupid decision. Now, okay, yeah. So we're going to create a new Ask at Runtime dialog, because I will show you step by step how you would go about creating a custom input field. Yeah, if we click on new, the Finder opens with your new custom Ask at Runtime dialog. This is basically just a copy of our default Ask at Runtime dialog. Yeah. The first things to do would probably be to open it in your preferred like text or code editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code. For no particular reason, you can just use anything you want. Yeah, the scripts.js file that I just opened is the starting point for the Ask at Runtime dialog. So it would be best if we begin there. I'm also going to open it in a browser so that we can look at it. Yeah, the Ask at Runtime dialog actually displays a lot of stuff now, and why is that? That's because we're not inside of an environment that of the pdfToolbox environment, and when we are not inside of the pdfToolbox, we are using this file calls params, which contains JSON data that pdfToolbox hands over to the Ask at Runtime dialog when we run the Ask at Runtime dialog. Yeah, so now we go to the starting point, which is the add event listener, which listens to DOM content loaded. And the first thing it does, it looks if this send extension message function exists. And this is basically just a checkup that looks if we are inside of pdfToolbox or not, because this function only exists if we are inside of pdfToolbox. Yeah, and because we're not inside of pdfToolbox, we're inside this else, and we're handing over calls params to this kvm variable, which stands for key value map, which is a global variable that contains the data that pdfToolbox hands over to the Ask at Runtime dialog. This calls params variable is exactly this one right here, which contains the data that is displayed right here in the Ask at Runtime dialog right now. So yeah, the problem is we wouldn't really, if we wanted to create a custom input field now, a date picker, we would need the actual data that pdfToolbox is handing over to our Ask at Runtime dialog, because our variable that we put into our process plan, and not our process plan, sorry, our fixup right here, our date variable isn't in here right now. So how do we get that information? That's actually pretty simple. I've written a small function for that. Let me just copy and paste that right now. This one right here. This is just creating a pre-element, which stands for pre-formatted text, and displays the data that we hand over to this.
Let me briefly interrupt Vincent, because I was going to say this at the beginning, but of course I didn't. You don't have to make screenshots the whole time, hoping to capture everything. Like I said, it will be recorded, but we will also share all the code afterwards. So this function that that Vincent is using here, and some of the other bits and pieces, you will get all of that at the end, so that you can use it yourself as well.
I was actually about to say that that all the stuff I'm writing here, you don't need to actually write that by yourself now. We're going to send as David just said, send around the code.
Vincent, can you increase the text size a little bit? It's very hard to read.
Oh yeah, sorry.
You need a bigger screen, Ulrich.
Yeah, the problem is I have a 2K monitor, so it probably
enough on my screen.
Scales badly. Yeah, then I will increase this right here as well. Okay, is it big enough now? Okay, cool. Yeah, as of where was I? Oh yeah, yeah. It just simply creates this pre-element and adds the data that we hand over to this display data function into the pre-element, and then just adds it to the DOM. So yeah, now we need to call this function, and we need to call it inside this load JSON function, because inside of here we receive the data that pdfToolbox is handing over to the Ask at Runtime dialog. We're just going to give this response to the display data function. And now we only need to call this. Let me just edit. We have need to call this once inside of pdfToolbox. We have our custom ask at runtime dialog. We need to select that and just click test. And now it does nothing. That's odd. Okay, that didn't happen yesterday. And I can't click, okay, okay. Let me just do that again. Probably just close our pdfToolbox and open it again. Open our sample PDF file again. Select our custom profile. Let me just look at. I don't know why, but it deleted all the files in our custom ask at runtime profile. Oh, I know why they did it wrong. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot to tell you about this, and I did it again. Let me just close this up. It's a little bit stupid. If you create a new ask at runtime dialog and like this, and you then click on cancel, what I probably just did, it deletes the ask at runtime dialog. And I don't know why I did. It's just a habit. I don't know why I always click on cancel, but yeah. Don't click on cancel, because if you start writing your code and then click on cancel, it just deletes everything. Yeah, then let me just set this up again. We have our scripts.js. We need to copy our function right here. Call it once. That's why it displayed nothing, because there was nothing left. And now we should be able to call this and see our data. If we click on text, yeah, now it displays the data properly. We need to copy this and wait for it to run. Takes a little bit of time. Okay. Not cancel. Okay. And now we need to remove this data right here and copy our new data inside, so that we can have the exact same data that pdfToolbox is handing over to the ask at runtime dialog in our browser environment.
Okay, so that's needed in order to be able to create the real thing in the browser there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So if I reload the page now, we only have our date input field. And what we can also take a look at what pdfToolbox is handing over to the ask at runtime dialog. We have our input, which contains all the variables and some data for them. We have this env, which probably stands for environment, which contains some basic information, like what language, not your system is running on, but pdfToolbox is using at the moment. And some other stuff. This would probably be useful if you would have custom strings and want to translate them and show the right strings. It's probably pretty useful. And translations only contains the strings that the ask at runtime dialog is using. So yeah, the next step would be to just remove this stuff, because you only need to do that once if you create a new like profile and you want to create a custom ask at runtime dialog for one profile.
So that's probably worthwhile saying once more, this is only once at the beginning, and it's only because you want to have something to play with here that is exactly the same as what would pdfToolbox give you.
Yeah.
Once
exactly.
you know what you get, then you can delete everything again.
So yeah, the next step is that in both cases, if we are inside of our browser or inside of pdfToolbox, the start function is called. So we just going to take a look at this function. So what does this function do? A lot, but the most important part is that in this function right here, we're going over all our variables and creating our HTML for the Ask at Runtime dialog. So yeah, we have the set translation strings, and it does exactly how the function sounds. It sets, for instance, this header right here. Then we sort this KVM input. KVM, as you probably remember, stands for key value map, which contains our data that we need. And input, as I've told you just before, contains all the variables. So this is just a sorting function that decides in what order the variables are displayed in, and you can also edit that, but I will not show you that. The next and one of the most important parts is this mustache. And this is a library which is called mustache.js. And what this does, mustache.js is basically a template, a template library that lets you create a HTML template and insert data into that template. And this part right here, this mustache parse, is not really necessary for you. This is just if you create a template that is used multiple times in a row, then this mustache parse helps mustache to remember the template so that it doesn't need to reread it every time. Yeah. The next step is that we loop over all of our variables that we get from the not at the Ask at Runtime dialog, from pdfToolbox. And in here, there's this big if statement, else if statements, with a lot of else if statements that basically decides what template or what input type is going to be used. So when we take a look at our data right here, we can see that our variable date at the moment has the type string. And if we look into our if statement right here and look for string, we can see that this is going to use this template string. And now I will show you how you create your own templates and how they basically work. Let me just copy some code for that. It's not that much, but it wouldn't take me too long to write. That's out right now. So what this is basically HTML code with these added double curly braces that contain an ID, not an ID, but a key, which is basically a reference to an object that we hand over to mustache.js, which I will show you how that is done in a moment. So these tags indicate where mustache.js is going to place the data. And if you want, like us right now, want to create your own custom template, which one template at the moment in the current implementation of the Ask at Runtime dialog contains one input field, which basically always consists of a label and the input type we are going to use. And it's always wrapped in this row div with 2 columns. That is basically the layout of the Ask at Runtime dialog at the moment. So yeah, and I can also show you this in the debugger, which is also the reason why we are doing all of this not inside of pdfToolbox, because if we do this inside of a browser, we can access the debugging function of our browser. So that's why we do this. And if you see these error messages right here, you don't have to worry, because if you look at this Windows send extension message, for instance, this is a function that only exists, as I've said before, in the pdfToolbox context, and we can't really do anything about that. It will also probably show up some more if you actually interact with the, as I've done right now. If you click inside input fields and so on, it will show up some more, but you don't have to worry about that. That isn't a problem. So yeah, and if we look at this right here, we have our row and our two columns, as we see here in our template. So yeah, the next step is actually just to write code so that we actually use this template. And we're going to do that by adding another if statement to this if block here. Let me just format that real quick. So yeah, how do we actually decide when our custom input field is going to be used? Because at the moment, it is actually always decided by this type, and our date variable also has the type string, and that you can actually do by for instance, or you can also come up with another solution using the key and doing something like this, for instance. We just copy this real quick. We are looking inside of our key, and that it's this right here. And if it starts with date, then we're going to use our custom template. And we're doing this with starts if, so that, for instance, if we had multiple variables where we would need an datetime picker, then we could have this variable start with date and use it with multiple variables. Actually, that's why we do it. I do it this way. So the next thing we need to do is actually call our mustache renderer, and I will show you in the debugger how this works. It's actually pretty nifty. So we call this function mustache render, which takes two parameters. The first one is our template, and the second one is an object which contains our information. So I will just copy that real quick right here. So if we see here, we have label, ID, and values, and those are the same as in our template, because we have three different types of keys in here. We have this ID, we have this label, and we have this value. So what mustache.js is going to do is it's going to take the information we provided with and fill in those tags with our information. So I probably actually need to use our template, because at the moment I would probably I think it would actually work if we reload this. Yeah, it actually displays template boolean. So now we have a kind of ugly input field, and I'm going to copy some CSS just so that it doesn't look so boring. But you can obviously style it in any way you want. Just open up this CSS and add it to the bottom. This just like makes it look a little bit nicer to the eye. At the moment, we still can, because it's just an input field like before. It's just an input text field. We can still input anything we want. So we actually need to import a library for that. I've used a flat picker for this, and the sole reason why I didn't use any other library is just because Soul Picker doesn't have any dependencies, and it's pretty small. So it's good for this demonstration. Just copy the JS and CSS files for that. And I also need to add them to our HTML file. And I'll copy the code for this as well. And the CSS. Yeah. Now that we have our custom input type, we need to actually call our flat picker. And that's also pretty simple to do, because you just need, and you need to do that after you add the our input field to the DOM. This is done right here. Rendered is the variable where our HTML code that mustache render, the mustache render function is returning, is contained in. And as I said, I will show you in the debugger what this rendered contains after mustache.js render is called. So in our scripts, oh, it's already opened. Let me make that a little bit bigger. If you set a breakpoint here and reload the site, we can actually see that rendered is actually containing our HTML template, but filled in with the correct data that we handed over to Mustache.js. Like for instance, here we have this date, which is the same as in our data, this label right here. So as I said, the next step is to call this the flat picker, which is pretty easy to do. You just need to give it it has only two parameters. You give it a selector, and as a second parameter, an object which contains some settings for this flat picker, but we are not going to change anything for that. Now, how are we going to select which input field is going to be a date picker? That's also pretty easy to do, because if we look at our template, we have in this div, we have this class date, and this is only going to be used for our date template. So we can actually use this and just write dot date. But we don't want the div around it. We actually want this input field. So we're just going to select this input. And if we reload, save this first and reload the Ask at Runtime dialog now, as you can see, there's this pointer now, and we can click on it, and it actually displays a date picker. You can't type, maybe you can hear it that I'm trying to type something, but you can't actually type here in here anymore, and you now can use this date picker. And the cool part is that you can customize the is it any way you want, and you can have one unique like output format for your date, and have it be safe for people to handle. Yeah, now that we actually have the date picker, there's basically only one thing left to do, and that is actually get the information that we now have in our input field right here and give it back to pdfToolbox. And that is done in this get values function, also contained in this script.js file. This function is called if you, in the Ask at Runtime dialog, click on the bottom right corner OK button, then this function is called right here. And what this does, it is basically creates an object with input, which is going to contain key value pairs. The keys are going to be the keys of the variables that pdfToolbox gave to us at the beginning, which are those right here. And it's, for instance, it should contain this key right here. And the values are obviously going to be the values that you select in your input fields. So yeah, I'll also just copy that and go over the code because it's pretty simple. So we have this variable right here, which contains a list of all the class entries that use date, all the elements that use the class date, sorry. And it just simply loops over them, selects with the query selector the input field, which is this one right here, and it takes their values and adds a new entry in this return input object. Yeah, I'm using, but you can obviously do it also in any way you want because there are no boundaries here. I'm using a data a data attribute inside of our HTML element, which I can show you here. It is this entry right here, which contains the key from our variable. So we just select it right here, create a new entry, as I said before, give it the correct value, and so on and so on. And this is basically it. If we save this and actually try to use it inside of pdfToolbox right now, it should hopefully work. Yeah, it's already selected. So if we click on test right now, it should display our date picker. And if we, I don't know, select anything and click on OK, it should display the date in the top left corner right here. Takes a little bit of time. And it worked. Nice. Yeah, that's basically it for this introduction. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I'll try to answer them.